There we go. Okay. So, my name is Brad Breedyhoff of Museum Study, and I'd like to welcome everyone to our latest free webinar, The 11th Agent of Deterioration, Incorrect Cultural Claire, presented by Melanie Deer with Martin Schultz. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on Museum Studies YouTube channel along with all of our past webinars. You are welcome to introduce yourself in the chat. Please share your name, location, and institution, or if you're in private practice, we have several of those I know. Oh, there's the Field Museum. Um, Museum Study provides online professional development for people who work in or with cultural institutions. I see quite a few familiar faces here today from past students, and actually a number of our instructors are signed up to join us today. Um, you may find that one of our upcoming courses is of interest since you found this topic interesting. In September, we'll be running our Repatriation Beyond NAGPRA course taught by Amy Covell-Murthy. And I will drop a link in the chat to that later if for anyone's interested. That course, like all of our courses currently, runs for 4 weeks online. Amy is the instructor for that course, but she brings in outside guests. Last year we had two guests who, at least one was a tribal historic preservation officer. They were both collection managers with Native institutions, and it was fascinating to hear their takes on repatriation. And Amy Covell-Murthy is at the Carnegie Museum of Natural History in Pittsburgh, where they have been doing repatriation beyond what is required by NAGPRA for more than a decade now. And so that we taught that course last summer for the first time, and we had 9 people sign up for it right away, which is above our average. So it was well received. Today's presentation will be led by Melanie Deer and Martin Schultz. Unfortunately, Amanda Lancaster wasn't feeling well and unable to join us today. Melanie is the collections manager and assistant NAGPRA coordinator at the Center for Archaeology and Society Repository at Arizona State University in Tempe. She received her BA in anthropology and creative writing from the University of Arizona and her MA in museum studies from Johns Hopkins. She has over 10 years of experience in collections and is also the chair of the Registrar's Committee Western Region. Martin Schultz is an independent museum curator who has been working in museums in Europe and the US in various capacities since 2012 and began working with international repatriation related matters in 2015. Martin holds a master's degree in ethnology from the University of Frankfurt in Germany. With that, I will turn it over to you, Melanie, and thank you so much, both of you, for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting us. Uh, Let me make sure I can get my screen shared appropriately. Are we good there?
It is visible.
Beautiful. Okay, so we're going over a project we've been working on to potentially add an 11th agent of deterioration, currently being called incorrect cultural care. So I want to stress that this is a team of us because schedules, all that kind of stuff. It's very rare that we're all able to be in the same spot. So I wanted to go over the whole team with everyone. So there's myself, Melanie Deer. I am in Arizona, collections manager, assistant NAGPRA coordinator. Then we have Angela Garcia. She is the cultural preservation compliance supervisor at Salt River Pima Maricopa Indian Community in Arizona. We have Amanda Lancaster, the curator of collections at the Alateque Museum in Alaska. We have Martin Schultz, our independent curator, who is based in Sweden, Germany, that general feel of things. And then we have Raylan Williams, who is the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer at Gila River Indian Community in Arizona. So after these introductions, I always have a disclaimer on respect. So typically, when you hear disclaimers on respect, In these kind of contexts. It's about how um, we need to speak with a language of respect and come at, that kind of thing. However, this disclaimer, although that is valuable, is being put forward in that the discussion we are having is inherently disrespectful. The concept of working such culturally significant things into this Western ideal in itself is disrespectful, but the goal we have is this is the first step to move past that disrespect, get the communication going, talk the language that we're all trained in. Speak the museum language to kind of get a hold and grasp this in our minds. Um, just in case you guys don't know about the current agents of deterioration, they were established by CCI, the Canadian Conservation Institute, back in the 90s. They are water, fire, incorrect temperature, incorrect humidity, theft, vandalism, physical damage, chemical damage, pests, light UV and infrared, and dissociation, which was formerly called curatorial neglect. Um, so these have been established in the museum world, in the conservation world, in the risk management world since the 90s and have not changed since then. It's this concept that almost every form of deterioration can be classified in one of these agents. So how did this project start? It actually started with my own personal blunder. I was asked to teach a museum administration class. I was given my boss who was teaching the class asked me to teach the students all they needed to know about collections in 3 hours. Um, Anyone who knows anything about collections knows that is a very daunting task. So, I did everything I could, and of course, I talked about the agents of deterioration. I am a very big supporter of the agents of deterioration. Um, but then in the discussion, I was talking about the agents of deterioration, and then I go, oh, well, then there's also this cultural care aspect of things, but that's a whole other conversation. And instantly, I started asking myself, why is it a separate conversation? Why do so many times we look at this as a going above and beyond, as an additional thing that we can do instead of the core part of our jobs as collections managers, as conservators, that kind of thing. Um, so I started formulating this idea of an 11th age of deterioration because like that's just kind of what a lot of our stuff is founded on. Whether you call it the 10 agents of deterioration or something else, a lot of what we do is based on that foundation. So I gathered this team, this intercultural and international team, and we created a survey. The survey was very rough. I thank you if you suffered through that survey and took it for us. It helped shaped everything tremendously. Um, if you don't know what I'm talking about, it used to be called isolation, which I hated that name, but couldn't come up with anything else until recently. So we had 94 respondents for that survey, and we kind of outlined roughly what we were thinking. And even with just this rough idea, we had 83% supporting this concept or possibly supporting. They're like, I'm kind of getting it, but I need more detail, which was fair. Um, so then the team met and we talked with people. We had one-on-ones. We um, did all that. And so then we had a follow-up survey, um, and follow-up discussions. Sorry. So then based on those discussions, based on that survey, we came up with this concept of, I mean, not really came up with the concept, but we stumbled upon this idea of this cultural care. And so many times if you're not really working in this realm very much, you wonder what is cultural care? Like what is it? So it's specific practices to care for an item or being based on appropriate cultural understanding. So the people who determine this are the culture of origin, not the culture that is housing it, um, or anything like that. It is the people that the item originally came from. If they are people or a culture who has transitioned, it's in Arizona, we have like the pre-contact archaeological cultures, which have shifted over time, but they have descendants still living. So it's those individuals who determine how it's best to care for their ancestors, and their ancestral items. Now, a big question we had is like, well, what about our traditional save, minimize risk, preserve things for as long as possible? Is that like completely inappropriate now? And the answer is no. There are plenty of cultures that still want to preserve things for as long as possible. Um, in your typical, like in America, example I love using is Abraham Lincoln's top hat. To the American people, to the American culture, the best care for that item is to preserve it as long as possible. Um, There will even be instances in indigenous peoples who certain items are to be preserved and that kind of thing. So we're not throwing out all the teachings that have happened in the past. We're just kind of tweaking them a little bit. Now, as I said, this is kind of the first step. I had actually a lovely conversation with Robert Waller, who established dissociation. And we were talking about whether, coming cultural care from the top down or bottom up. And it was just a fascinating conversation. And it made me realize that we want it all around. Everything to be done in collections care, policies, conservation, all that kind of stuff should be based upon appropriate cultural care. Um, so what exactly are we doing? So we're trying to make appropriate cultural care a standard of care. When you look at that list of like what means I'm doing a good job, what's the best practices, one of those check boxes should be cultural care, should be consultation with the community it originated from. It should be following those practices. That should just be an everyday thing we do. So how we're doing this is we are targeting the international understanding of the agents of deterioration established by CCI. We feel that this is appropriate because it is a form of deterioration. If you care for something culturally incorrectly, it harms the item. You may not be able to measure it in scientific standards like, oh, this piece flaked off. Um, but when working with some individuals, the wording that is kind of being chosen right now is the spirit of the item. This is a very hard concept for a lot of us Westerners. We acknowledge that. Um, but I mean, even if you think about Abraham Lincoln's top hat. Um, we want to preserve it and honor it in memory of him. What if your least favorite president decided to wear it for a shindig? Would that harm the item? Even if no physical damage happened, would that would that harm the item? And a lot of people would say yes. There's outrage over that. That's not what you do in our culture. You don't take Abraham Lincoln's top hat and wear it. And many people view it as slightly tainted. Um, this is obviously a lesser degree than a lot of indigenous cultures. They believe there is a spirit, there is a being, there is an individual um, in items. And by not doing things or doing certain things, it can cause harm to them and could possibly even kill them. Um, Now, one thing we want to stress is this is placing any other culture's guidelines on an item. So it's not just placing the Western ideology on an Indigenous item that needs to be cared for in a specific way. This is taking Indigenous culture A's guidelines and putting them on Indigenous culture B's items as well. So this isn't a consult with one group and you have it all down. Um, What are some of these examples? So, suffocation of items. I have been given permission to share from some tribes we're working with that the belief that the items have spirits and need to breathe meant instead of housing in plastic, we were housing in muslin because it allowed that airflow, that breath to come to them. Um, One thing, Martin, do you want to talk about the Sami drums a little bit?
Yeah, I can take the Sami drums and the gill silver, maybe.
Yep.
Yeah. So living in Europe, it's a bit different because the only indigenous group that we call an indigenous group here in Europe are the Sami in northern Scandinavia. And they've been fighting to get back their drums because they are connected to their shamans. And the shamanism is not going as strong as it has in the past, but they are trying to keep their culture alive. And it's important for them that their drums are not in the hands of non-Sami and non-practitioners of their religion. So everything needs to go back to them. And that is currently happening partly, at least in Europe. But I mean, the biggest problem, of course, is for them to find them. But that's something they should not be kept by non-Sami, and they should definitely not be used by anyone but people who are specialized in exactly the use of these drums. The gilt silver, I've been the curator for collections from the Americas and Africa at the Bern Historical Museum. And it was always strange for me to see that everything that I was responsible for had to be behind glass and nobody was allowed to see that. And it was hard for people to even visit the storage. But the historical department of the Bern Historical Museum is caring for gilt silver. So the medieval gilts that we had in Europe usually connected to certain professions within bigger cities. So everybody who worked in the same profession came together in these guilds. They have given these guilds have given their gilt silver to the Bern Historical Museum, but once a year when they have their feasts in their because they are still existing in their own houses in their guilds, they get everything that is in the storage or even on show in the permanent exhibition to use. And they clean it the way they think it's appropriate, and they return it to the museum. And then the museum has to go over that again and clean it so that it follows the standards of the museum to be put back on exhibit or in storage. so that they cannot harm other items that are in the storage or in the exhibition.
Another example we have is Catholic relics. Um, each one is handled a little bit different. You have some relics that are actually ground up, little pieces taken off for certain situations, for certain ceremonies. You have relics that are to not be touched. Um, and so even in kind of this Western, Catholics are viewed as part of the Western culture. Um, and they have specific cultural guidelines for different relics that they have. And you don't mess with that. Like that's just kind of one of those things that like they have a cultural guidelines for some of their relics. Um, so even within the Western culture, you kind of start, if you really look, you start finding these things. Um, and so this is an international concept. This is an intercultural concept. Um, and we don't have our tribal partners here with us today. They are very busy with repatriations and dealing with all of that. So I really wanted to work with them on how to appropriately um, express this for them. As you can tell, I don't usually read a script, but I'm going to read this one, especially because these words were approved by my tribal partners, and I want to make sure I stay in line with what they have approved me to say. Um, so, my tribal partners wanted me to convey that the concern of caring for their and other people's belongings in culturally appropriate ways is core to their way of life. Indigenous people from all over the world have been marginalized and had their culture and belongings taken from them. The least museum professionals can do is work with them to protect the souls and traditions contained within those belongings. Caring for items in a culturally respectful way is key part in how many Indigenous people interact and conceptualize their belongings and culture itself. Um, Items have a huge impact on their culture. Um, it has a huge impact on them as people. So this concept is very important to them. Um, but I know a lot of my experiences in America. There are indigenous peoples, there are museums all over the world. And so I want to also, once again, have Martin give a chance to talk about the importance that adding this agent would have internationally.
Yeah, thanks. Well, the two examples we just heard about from Scandinavia and from Switzerland are just two of them. Instead of indigenous people, what we have is national minorities. That's how we call um, other cultures within our own borders who speak different languages, have different cultures. And so while not having indigenous people, we do have people who are different from the national majorities we have in our countries here in Europe. So that makes it definitely something that is of international importance. The incorrect cultural care is something that can affect anything from any of these national minorities, of course. Um, Even within our countries here in Europe, when it comes to these national minorities, we have few curators, we have few staff that are trained to work with these national minorities. And that said, I'm not a member of any national minority, but I've been responsible for collections from all over the world as a trained anthropologist in ethnographic and other museums. So not being trained for that is something that is the is what quite common here in Europe. We don't have the national the how do you say? As you can see, I'm not a native speaker. Um, we don't have the indigenous populations from everybody from all over the world lives everywhere, but that does not necessarily make them interested in working with museums. So even if you live here in Europe, um, people need to interact with museums more and question them more, because otherwise museums also do not really learn what is necessary for the people that the pieces come from, that they care for or are supposed to care for. But it's done in different ways. So that said, the UNESCO developed the rights for indigenous people. So the expert mechanisms for the rights of indigenous people guarantee that indigenous people decide what happens with their belongings, in what way they are cared for, and all that. So what we try to establish is something that is kind of guaranteed by UNESCO already, but it's not a museum standard. And since most museums do not really follow that because of the lack of stuff or knowledge or whatever, it becomes even more important to talk more about that and bring that to the foreground, and together with the people that are affected by all that, of course. Melanie?
All right. Where are we now? So we conducted another survey. It has closed at this point. Um, we are continuing to discuss with people, obviously, as we have here today. Um, but from that second survey, we developed a proposal that we sent to CCI. Um, and we are in discussions with them right now. I don't know how much I can say about one thing or another, but we have submitted the proposal, the official proposal to them to add this as an 11th agent of deterioration, and we are talking to them about it. We have a website that you can find as much information on this as you can. We posted a copy of our official proposal on there so you can see exactly what we sent CCI. But that's where we are. So let's talk.
Okay, as I posted in the chat, if anyone has any questions for Melanie or Martin, you can either unmute yourself and ask your question, or you can post it in the chat. You mentioned having discussions with the Canadian Conservation Institute. Have you had any discussions with UNESCO about this?
We have not. Um, it's probably one of the next things on our list. We did apply to present at ICOM,
Mhm.
and we were turned down.
Really?
Yes.
That's too bad.
Hmm.
But I
Keep
think it's
applying.
important to move but I think it's important to move forward with the CCI first.
Hmm.
And as soon
Does
as
yeah.
we have feedback from there, we can see if it's worth approaching UNESCO with that too and informing them about that. But I think the first step is CCI, and we can step
Yeah.
one step up the hill.
Again, this is not the final step. This is the first step that we're taking. Um, so
For those who aren't familiar with the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples, or UNDRIP as it is often called, because That's a little easier to say. Um, it's not as commonly known here in the US because we're governed by NAGPRA and we're not original signees on DRIP. But UNDRIP is something that is much more commonly known outside of the US. So in Canada, they follow UNDRIP and they don't have a version of NAGPRA.
And there's nothing like NAPRA here in Europe at all.
And one could posit that it's probably more needed in Europe than anywhere else in the world.
All right, I see a couple questions.
Good.
Um, uh, Room 38 conference. I think there was, I don't remember what museum they were from, but how do you think updated NAGPRA, the Field Museum,
Field.
hi Field
Yes.
Museum, how do you think updated NAGPRA may affect this 11th agent? Um, I actually think they go hand in hand really well because of the duty of care. In the new update, you have duty of care, which requires consultation on how to handle individuals and NAGPRA relevant items. So in the US, we already have a law covering those, well, obviously for institutions that receive federal funding. Um, so we already have a law that establishes that need. Um, and you're supposed to default to traditional knowledge, all that kind of stuff. So that kind of already sets the foundation for that. However, it is only NAGPRA relevant items that fall under that. And it is only institutions that are applicable under NAGPRA. And that is only in the United States. So I think that it is the updated the revisions with the duty of care is core to this. And I actually think the US might have an upper hand in establishing cultural care practice beyond NAGPRA because you can kind of piggyback them on the consultations you're already doing for NAGPRA.
Mhm.
So you can go ahead and be like, okay, well, this doesn't fall under NAGPRA. You're at this point in time, it's staying in our care. How do we appropriately care for it while it's here? Whether it be here for the rest of eternity or whether it be here until you have your own repository, whatever that situation is, while it is in our care, how do we appropriately care for it? And you can have that in those meetings that you're already having about NAGPRA. And you're establishing those relationships. Um, so I actually think the US might have a leg up on this because of NAGPRA. I
Mhm.
hope that answers your question, Field Museum.
And because so many institutions around the US who have been dealing with NAGPRA have developed relationships
Mm-hmm.
with the communities already. And this is just part of that ongoing relationship.
Mm-hmm. All right, I got a thumbs up from them. So, would you consider presenting this preliminary work at the WAAC annual meeting? WAAC, what does that one stand for? There's so many acronyms out there.
I think that's the Western. Um, Casey, can you detail it for us? Thank you. Yeah.
I'd be willing to. I'll be honest, funding is very limited for, I might have some funding. When is it?
Well, and August. Okay. And many associations are allowing for remote
Hmm.
presentations now as well,
Yes.
which really
Yes.
opens things up. Oh, in Denver. Nice.
Denver. Oh, cool. And that's like this August, like in a month? Oh, okay. We'll talk. Here, let me. Boop, 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 boop.
Do you want me to drop each of your emails in? I want to check with you before
Yes,
I did that.
yes.
Okay,
You can
I will
definitely
do
drop my
that.
email. Martin, are you okay with your email being dropped?
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I will do that.
I couldn't come to Denver, but I would be happy to do that remotely too, if that's possible.
Technology has made it so, gosh, you can have hybrid. You can have someone there and other people remote.
Hmm. LACMA has developed some really interesting protocols to appropriate cultural collections care documentation in their database. I wonder if reaching out to them for involvement feedback from them might be helpful. Yes, the database situation is such a hot topic.
Mhm.
Even like how that would be that would be interesting. Yeah.
It's why the timing of what you're doing is so important, though, because you're right. It is a hot topic. And Mukherjee
Hmm.
came along a few years ago that took this consideration into account. But now you're seeing all of the major database companies try to include this in their collections management databases. There's
Hmm.
been a real change in that in the last couple of years.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I would love to talk to them. I know a database company that would love to talk to them too because they talked to me about it.
Anyone else have any questions for Melanie and Martin? I
Or
want to
thoughts,
Or
opinions.
yes, yes, thoughts. I'm glad you had that conversation with Rob, who actually signed up for this, though I haven't seen him on the list of people here. Um, but that's it. Any conversation with Rob is always interesting. He's very thoughtful and has very strong ideas.
Oh, it was fun. That was
Yes,
probably one of the funnest conversations I've ever had, and we need to do it again, Rob, if you're on.
we can arrange that. I can get John Simmons in on that conversation too.
Oh my gosh, that would be one fun
Yes,
conversation.
that would be very interesting. Yeah, Rob teaches risk analysis, no
Hmm.
surprise for us, and
No,
he'll be teaching that in October this year.
yeah, follow along on our website. I'm trying to keep it up to date. It's lagged a little bit in terms of like webinars and that kind of thing. Um, but I am also going to try and post more on my LinkedIn about it. Right now it's kind of quiet because we were developing the proposal and then submitting it to to CCI. And right now I'm not sure what I can share of our discussions yet. So I will share whatever I'm allowed to share, because I think it's important that people, one, learn how this process even works, but two, know where it is. So when advocating for this change in your institution, um, you can know what that's coming. Someone asked for website. Let me get that copied for you.
Yes, thank you. I couldn't grab it from the slide.
Yeah. No, I know. Yeah, question too. So send you the
And the field has their hand up.
Field has their hand up.
Yeah.
Hello, it's room 38, the Field Museum again.
I assume that's Zoe.
Actually, Zoe's with us, but this is Emma.
Oh, well, glad to have you with us.
Hello, Emma and Zoe and our wonderful intern Julia here from the Field Museum working in registration and anthropology. Really, I had a question about the money side of things. We were the recipient of a really fantastic grant that provided funding to get Indigenous folks paid for their knowledge as they were doing consultations for us. So in, the goals of adding this 11th agent of deterioration, I wonder if some aspect of ensuring that folks are being accommodated appropriately and paid for the knowledge that they're giving when they are giving cultural protocols and cultural care, or if there's any discussion around, making that a staple of this 11th agent of deterioration. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree, pay people for their knowledge. Um, the experts on The traditional knowledge are the traditional knowledge keepers. You pay a conservator to come in and tell you how to conserve your items. You should pay the traditional knowledge keeper how to care for items appropriately in that manner as well. Um, Money is a trickier thing, especially in the US right now. Money is a very tricky thing. Um, Part of the reason we're trying to establish it in this like internationally accepted um, concept of the agents of deterioration is because that's the first step to really classifying it as a standard. When it's internationally accepted as something we need to consider. So when it comes to things like grants or arguing to your board or whatever, you now have the backing of it being um, an officially adopted understanding. Now, with the agents of deterioration, you do not have they don't, CCI doesn't tell you how to do it. They just tell you that this is something that needs to be considered. This is something that needs to be dealt with. Um, for like temperature and humidity, um, CCI in the agents of deterioration do not tell you what temperature and humidity levels they are. They just say certain items outside of this range, bad. Um, and it's up to the field to kind of determine exactly what those protocols are. Um, so in a similar instance, they're not going to tell you how to care for them. Um, so they're not going to tell you you have to pay the people. That is more of another movement that's tied into this. Like I said, this is kind of the start. There's a lot more that has to be done. Um, I would love people who are better at advocating for this kind of stuff than I am. I leave money to my boss. I tell him what supplies I need and how much they cost, and he tells me if I can get them or not. So I am not as big of a money speaker. So I would love input from people who do speak that language a lot more on how we can make this more of a standard practice.
I think a big part of making things like this a standard practice is just more and more people actually doing it and it becoming the norm, just like internships shouldn't be free. And the more people who start paying interns, then the more people are going to.
Okay. City of Calgary Public Art, if you don't mind me calling you out. What kind of guidance would come along with this addition to the agent's deterioration since the others have pretty detailed documentation? Um, if this gets adopted by CCI, if they do fully adopt this, there is, so we have our proposal, but that is not the final. Um, the steps that I have been informed are what would have to happen if it is going to be adopted, would be input from the community, both Indigenous communities as well as the museum profession and conservation profession. And then after that, there would be a lot of work to create those detailed documentation and guidance. One thing we're going to really push for is that consultation aspect of things. Um, I hope we can give examples, but stress to people that this is not how it is in every situation. That like the number one thing you have to do is consult. And on that, I'm hoping one of my big pictures ideas is to get working groups around the world because I can't do every culture throughout all of the world. So create working groups in different parts of the world that work together to formulate resources, and then all the resources from all of those working groups get added to like one website. Because there are institutions that have things from all over the world that they're not a part of, and they're not going to be part of that working group because they're not in that region. Um, but they can go to this one website and see resources on how to contact people, who to contact, or say there's a group that wants just this is just what you do. Like this is the list of how to do it. Just post it on the website and, you know, we don't have time for consultation. There might be someone like that, and that would be great. But there are many that just this is who you need to contact. Not necessarily names because that changes, but like you need to speak to the group of elders, and this is how you can get a hold of them. You need to speak to this specific person in the tribe. This is how you get a hold of them. Um, that kind of thing.
Some of that goes on, but there is no one central place to find information like that. For instance, there is a group of people from the Southern Pacific Islands that have worked extensively with a number of European museums to help repatriate items back to the Pacific Islands.
Well, and even in Arizona, they have this beautiful government to government toolkit where literally it's a map of Arizona and you click on where you're talking about and it tells you all of the tribes to consult on and
Oh,
how to consult with
nice.
them. It's beautiful. Actually, my tribal partners were some of the people who put it together. It's beautiful. I would love that for the entire world, but I think that's a
Yes.
little too ambitious, at least for right now. Maybe, like next generation can do it. I'll get you the information. You set up the website. Um, but yeah, so I want everything in one spot. Um,
It's complicated because sometimes an item is made by one group to be sold to another group. So there was so
Mhm,
much interaction. Who do you contact for that? Who's responsible for that? The
mhm.
producers or the ones used it? So you have the cooler exchange in the Pacific, since we just heard the Pacific,
mhm,
um, where items were specifically made to be used by someone completely different.
mhm,
And then another problem that we have to deal with connected to that exchange is the museum exchange. So room 38, the Field Museum exchange with museums worldwide. So
Mhm.
the information you can give members of source communities that come to visit to you now focuses probably on everything that is still there. But they should also get information on what has been there in the past. And not everything has been exchanged. There were moths, there was all kinds of damage and harm in museums, and items just got discarded or destroyed. So there's so much more we have to talk about when we talk about the 11th agent of deterioration. Everything that people need to know is so much more than the information we currently give them.
yeah,
Okay.
I would say the difficulty of the one group making it for another group's use, I feel like that would be kind of a consultation thing. Group A might just be like it was made for them. They're the ones that have control over it. It may be as simple as that. So I definitely think, that the key to all of this is consultation.
Always is.
We have a long question in here from Shauna Jones.
From a military perspective, the rules surrounding consecrated guidons, there is no standard. They should be laid up and destroyed, left for the moths in a church. However, we have several in our museum which are being conserved, as do other museums around the world. Are you also considering including military cultural items in your research advice? Um, I'm not as familiar with that, but I feel I don't know. I guess my opinion, which might be incorrect because I'm not familiar with this exact situation, would be it doesn't matter if it's military, religious, or daily use. If it's a cultural item that needs to be cared for
We're not cared
or
for.
not cared for,
Mhm.
um, that's the way it should be. I don't make a distinction of what it was used for and what context. Um, if it needs to be cared for in a specific way, or not cared for in a specific way, then that's what should be done. Does that answer your question? Okay, good.
Casey has a recommendation.
Research Center for Material Culture in the Netherlands is working with people and communities globally. Worth contacting. Yes, they are.
And they also have curators who come from these areas that they care for. But in the end, they do everything like everybody else too. So they have more money to do that. And that is what is different. But I think the outcome is not that different from what happens in other parts here in Europe.
Heather offered a useful link that we have used in the past. I'm sure many others have as well. Oh, it's changed since the last time I was there too. Good to see they're keeping it up to date. Any other questions from anyone?
Just one. Just because I know I've been quite critical, but I just want to show you. This is the link to the database. The Research Center for Material Studies is connected to the National Museums of World Culture in the Netherlands. And if you look at their database and compare that to the work that is done with the research center, you see a discrepancy. So the data provided in the database are not really that impressive.
Yeah, this is one of the questions that's coming up now is as people are putting more and more information in online accessible databases, the question should be asked, and people are beginning to think of it, what information should we make public? And what information should we not make public?
Well, one of the informations that needs to be made public is how can source communities approach the museum to get information on these collections?
Absolutely.
But that's also something that, well, it's hard to find that information.
Yeah.
What's the situation at the museum? What about libraries? What about archives? All the archival holdings connected to the collections. How do I get access to that as a member of a source community?
Mhm. Yes, that communication and linking like that is one of the hardest things. It's why things take so long because people don't know where to start oftentimes.
Yeah.
And then, as you pointed out, Melanie, the tribal representatives are so overwhelmed with so many responsibilities and people coming at them from every direction. They are we in museums think that we're under-resourced, nothing compared to what they have to deal with.
Hmm.
Well, I want to thank you both for joining us today and sharing your ideas on this. As someone else pointed out earlier, this is, I think, a very important conversation, one that um, I've been hearing happening in small groups for years now, and I'm glad to hear it happening on a larger scale now. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, I'm so glad this worked out.
Yeah,
As I mentioned at the beginning, there was a lot of interest in this topic. I think we could do this again because there is so much interest in this topic. So particularly when you get updates,
hmm
things changes, particularly with your conversations with CCI and other organizations. Maybe we do another one and update people on
yeah,
how things are going.
I would love to do that.
Thank you so much for your time and thank you everyone for joining us for this. If you have any questions, I did include email addresses for Melanie and for Martin, and I will put my email address here as well if anyone has any questions. I'm actually typing it. I didn't have it copyable. Make sure I got it right. There we go. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out. All right. Thank you very much, Melanie, and we'll stay in touch.